Amitabh Kanji, Dr. Tripathi, Dr. Saurabh, Anna Roy, distinguished colleagues from the panel. I think the National Data and Analytics Platform is a transformational initiative, and I must congratulate Sri Amitabh Kanji, Dr. Shekhar, and Dr. Anna on providing so much data in public domain. In fact, Dr. Shekhar and I go back to 1989, and I recall telling him great things were always expected from him. And I think this portal is one of the really big statistical data sets that he has managed to put out in public domain. Benchmarking governance is an integral part of India's Vision India 2047. In fact, Sri Amitabh Kanji was one of the leading panelists in that session on Civil Services Day, which the Honorable Prime Minister addressed, in which the Prime Minister said the individual citizen's voice must be heard and the citizen must be empowered adequately to repose trust in the grievance redressal system. In fact, we in DRPG administer and bring out four big indices: the Good Governance Index, which is an assessment of states, the quality of governance of states; the National E-Services Delivery Assessment, where we assess about 1,450 services on digital platforms that are being provided. Also, we have formulated the District Good Governance Index, where we evaluate 738 districts on governance parameters. But we also administer one of the largest portals of grievances, that is the CPGRAM and the Centralized Public Grievance Redressal and Monitoring System. And this is adopted across all central ministries, departments, attached offices, subordinate offices, autonomous bodies, all states, union territories, and is the largest citizen engagement platform in the country. Maps over 85,000 grievance officers, and grievance redressal timelines are well established, and citizens are informed on the action taken on their grievances. And the Prime Minister himself reviews it as part of Pragati meetings once a month, and the frequent reviews held within government on how grievance redressal is taking place. We've also tried to monitor improving service delivery, and from December 20th to 25th in 2021, we had conducted the Sushasana Saptah, in which a nationwide campaign for redressal of public grievances and improving service delivery, in which all states, districts, and union territories participated. Over 700 collectors participated in the campaign and visited tehsils and panchayat committee headquarters. And the quantum of work that one can see even in a campaign of a small duration was quite phenomenal. 2.89 crore service delivery applications were disposed of in a 5-day period across 700 districts. And it was the first time when we realized how interoperability could enhance systemic efficiency. Hundreds of grievance redressal portals, service delivery portals functioning in unison could collectively produce an impact which was far higher than what we had ever envisaged in terms of redressal of public grievances and improving service delivery. And it also enabled us to leverage a pool of emerging technologies, and this was something we seized on, and as CEO Niti Aayog rightly pointed out, evidence-based policy making is something that every public administrator is taught, and what public administration has been pushing for a number of years. I think this portal would be quite enormously beneficial. We would explore ways in which our own portal, the CPGRAMs, can be interoperable with the NDAP platform. And I have a request for the CEO Niti Aayog in that this conference should perhaps be backed by a conference of the Directorates of Economics and Statistics of all states in how to utilize the NDAP data. And they are at different stages of development, and it's not easy to systematize. In fact, the publication of district data in many states dates back to 2017-18, 2015-16, and updation is not very easy. The NDAP itself provides a huge amount of opportunity to update data. I'd also like to speak on integration of government programs and regular feedback. I think NDAP can provide a significant difference in in terms of e-governance and how a citizen can interface with government. And the quantum of feedback through, as you've operationalized hackathons, you've done Facebook Live discussions, you've also used innovation boxes, and NDAP can provide a forum wherein which huge number of citizen interface and responses can be brought about. And this can create a whole of government approach to process reengineering, institutional restructuring, operationalization of multiple high-end portals. This can be taken. In fact, one of the points that emerged from our Vision India 2047 on governance discussion was to bring government and citizens closer using technology and benchmarking governance. And that can only be feasible when portals like NDAP are fully operationalized and integrated with very large systems, digital portals that are currently in operation. In fact, at IIT Madras Research Park, we had convened a symposium between young civil servants who are less than 35 years, 40 of them, with 40 academics and 40 seed stage entrepreneurs and 40 established entrepreneurs on what they would like to see India in 2047. And the common voice that emanated from the symposium was strong published data sets is something that they would like to see, and decision making should be based upon quality decision making should be based upon robust data sets. And as Narayana Murthy once famously said, in God we trust, and everybody else brings data to the table. So my compliments to CEO Niti Aayog for bringing so much data to the table, and we look forward to using this. Personally, as an author, as a researcher, I look forward to using this portal very extensively. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was both illuminating and inspiring. So we now move to the non-bureaucratic part of the program. We have two academics here, and then I have my colleague, Dr. Shekhar Gonu. And for fear that I would be accused of favoring my former organization in CAR, let me now call on Dr. Udit Kapoor, who has actually been extremely closely involved, I understand, with the development process. Udit?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity. First, I would like to thank Niti Aayog, CEO, I think, who's been here, and his effort and vision. And Anna to execute it, I think, is a Herculean task. And I say this with all honesty because I'm purely an academic. I am what you call consumer of data, and my quest is only academic. Right? Now, in my very brief stint as a researcher and an academic, I've encountered two kinds of academics. The first kind are possessors of the truth. So for them, data is not relevant. They have self-evident truth. They peddle it around, and anything else doesn't really matter. So if the evidence comes to the contrary, then evidence must be wrong because they are right. And the second type that you encounter are seekers of the truth. These are the curious type, who have prior beliefs, but they look at the data, they look at the evidence, and they might have to revise their beliefs. They might have to either it confirms to their beliefs. So in that sense, this endeavor is extremely important because in the absence of data, we academics typically become possessors of truth, and self-evident truth is being presented in the form of science and research. Now, data is a very expensive and a costly endeavor. You know, when today to produce an estimate of poverty, I think has exponentially gone up. You know, Professor Sonal Desai would agree with me how costly it is to just put the data together. And getting research assistant to assemble the data has also become extremely costly. So in that sense, research is becoming very, very expensive for a common student, for an average student, to be able to perform any research. I'll give you an example. So when I started my research on health economics, I was curious as an economist to understand because everybody talked about shortages of health in India. I was more curious to understand whether we are efficiently utilizing the existing resources or not. Right? I mean, we think that in India there's a shortage of health. But as an economist, you always ask the other side of the question on efficiency. So I started looking at the government manual. The government manual says that the first point of contact for the person at the panchayat level, at the village level, is the sub-center. And the government has mandated based on so many population, there should be so many sub-centers. After that, if you still have a problem, you go to the primary health center, and then you go to the community health center, and then the district hospital. So, I being from Uttar Pradesh, 20% of the population goes to the public sector for the healthcare needs. Most people go to the private clinics. So I wanted to understand that the government has mandated this infrastructure. Does it exist or not? So in 2017, I had to assemble data from the Ministry of Health. Very expensive exercise to put the data together. Then I had to get data from the census, put it together at the district level, what the population is, to determine the government rule of so many sub-centers, so many primary health centers. The Ministry of Health data on district was not compatible with the census data on district. So there was a battery of 5 researchers who were sort of putting this data together. And that's very costly. I mean, I could do it because I had a grant, I'm from Indian Statistical Institute, but for a normal student, it would be very expensive. And because I have assembled the data, nobody can replicate it. It becomes, this data, even though it's publicly available, becomes a private property. So I did assemble that, and we did find something very interesting. In UP, we have an excess of community health centers, 3 times more than what is required, and 3 times less of the sub-centers. So for a common person, for the first point of contact, we have a huge shortage. But community health centers, and that gave us insight. We then started speaking to policymakers, and they told us that community health centers require infrastructure to be built. There's an incentive to build infrastructure. But sub-centers, the incentives might be lacking at the political level of what the challenges are. But just the amount of energy we have to spend in putting the data together. And now when I do my research, nobody can replicate it also. So in that sense, am I really producing science? Am I producing evidence? Can it be taken, as evidence? I produce an estimate, but that's not really data. That's not evidence, right? Somebody else needs to confirm whether what Mudit Kapoor has done is actually correct or not. And that's what I think policymakers, when they say evidence, they have a challenge because their challenge is very real. If they make wrong decisions, there are consequences. I make a wrong decision, there's no consequences as far as research is concerned. Right? I mean, my research is wrong, so be it. So I think that this is a very, very important endeavor because the idea is to put up good quality data, make it available to young researchers, and at the same time question the established researchers whether their evidence, is it correct or not correct, can it be replicated or not. And I must say that, we have policymakers here. Working with economists must have been a big challenge because I believe, I always joke with my students that there are 2 laws that govern economists. One is that to every economist, there's an equal and an opposite economist. And the second law is both of them are wrong. So now, in the absence of data, this gives us an opportunity to actually answer some of these questions, right? When data becomes available, the objective is to confirm our beliefs. We get closer to the truth. It's not that we found the truth and this is the ultimate truth. No, data doesn't do that. But data takes us one step closer. It builds a common platform for researchers to have a discussion. Otherwise, what we have is not research scientific discussion. We have one belief being competing with other beliefs. So in that sense, I think NDAP goes one step ahead as a researcher. If it's able to fulfill its objective, then I think for researchers, for young researchers, for the curious mind, for the second type of researchers who are seeking the truth, it's just a huge, huge step, huge reduction in cost for doing research. So with that, I think this is a very, very bold and a very important initiative, and I really welcome the team at Niti Aayog. Thank you very much for putting this together. It's a work in progress, but it's work.
Thank you for that resounding information, Rohit, and thank you for all the support that I know you have provided, including in screening research papers, encouraging researchers. Now, before turning to my own colleague, Shekhar Bonu, let me turn to my former colleague and good friend, Sonal Desai, on 2 points, Sonal. One is perhaps the point that Budit made, which is the cost of generating primary data. Because what we have here is really an assemblage of largely administrative data, but you deal with household data. So, just what you've seen in 20 years. And then somebody along the way talked about the issues that arise with anonymization, but also dissemination. So could you just share your experience in those areas and what it might mean for the inclusion of household data sets in NDAP going forward?
Thank you. Thank you for those interesting questions. I'm a bit of a fish out of water on this particular table because I actually, as a sociologist, I and my colleagues actually go and talk to people. We collect data from people and we ask, all kinds of weird questions, such as, घर में कुछ एक्सीडेंट हुआ था, उसके लिए आप खर्चे के लिए पैसे कहाँ से लाए? अच्छा, लोन ली थी, तो ये शाहूकार से लोन क्यों ली थी? आपने कोई बैंक से नहीं लोन ली? These are the kinds of questions we ask. Okay, we ask questions about schools were closed during the pandemic. Did a teacher come and speak to your child and give some homework so that the child could do that homework? Okay. Now, when we ask, and these are real questions, these are real issues that individuals face. But when we ask these questions and we start analyzing what individuals are experiencing, there is a tendency to basically tell the story that the data makes possible for you to tell. It's like, you're looking for your car keys under the lampshade and not really looking at it in the corner when you dropped it. Okay? So you have data from individuals and you look at your explanation as being sort of individual specific explanation. So we might say, okay, that the person who did not borrow from a bank did so because he was less educated, less connected, he didn't understand how the banks work. Okay? Or we might say that the child who did not do any homework during the pandemic was because his parents didn't understand the value of the education. What would be helpful is if we could also link it to the nature of financial services available in the area, and to see if this person could have actually borrowed with relatively fast speed and comfort from more formal sources. Or it would be very helpful to see if this guy lived in a hamlet which was close to a school a school that was close to a large transportation network, so that the teacher could actually get to the school, distribute the homework, and the child could do it. Okay? So in some sense, and from a public policy perspective, it's very important to link what individuals see and experience with what services are being linked. Okay? And we need to do it at a sort of a very specific and hyper-localized level. So as an example, we were actually at one point in time doing research on the impact of NREGA on women's employment. Okay? Now, NREGA data, basically what we were curious to know is that whether implementation of NREGA led to women's increased labor force participation for women who were not employed before. Women who were in the agricultural labor force anyway would be sort of stop working in somebody's field and go work for the government. It was far more respectable. Okay? Did it actually draw out very different women? So what I was doing was I actually had a set of 10 colleagues going up on NREGA website, linking each of our villages with the NREGA data on the website and sort of doing one-to-one matching so that we could actually see what was happening in those specific villages. Now, sir, what happened was that we were going through all the states one by one, and by the time we got to Tamil Nadu, that particular year of data disappeared. Okay, so I have a fairly complete data set except for the Tamil Nadu information. So I can speak about the rest of the country, but not about Tamil Nadu. Okay. Now, with availability of NDAP and local government directory ID, we can do a fair amount of linking that would make some very interesting analysis possible, specifically with respect to changes in service delivery systems, improvement or lack thereof, and what it means for individual experiences. There is a challenge, however, okay, and that's a challenge that Mr. Reddy has already identified, in that part of our ethical clearances and, in fact, our promise to the people who are kind enough to share their lives and hopes and dreams with us is that nobody's going to know about you individually, right? And frankly, if you know which village this college-educated scheduled caste woman with 3 children comes from, you can identify her. Right? So if we are going to keep our promise, the only granularity with which we can make the data available to the public, okay, is at the district level. Our own team can work with it at a sort of a more granular level, because we can usually be sure that they are not going to be releasing this information. At one point in time, we had thought that we might be able to release some of the more granular data with some confidentiality agreement, until an extremely well-known economist came to me and said that, I'm trying to do some interesting filming of the experiences of households, and we would like to use your sample to define, which category of households we are taking. I was a little bit shocked. I didn't want to see CNN's camera going into the households where we were doing those interviews. And I said, I'm sorry, we really can't release the village information. That's part of my ethical clearance promise to my institutional review board. And his answer was, okay, your data set has actually the census population figure, and I can identify the village based on that and go there. And I said, oh, and I have already had a RA working on it. I said, but unfortunately, we have actually masked the census data, and we haven't told you that this particular village has, 26,450 households. We have made it 30,000, or we have made it 24,000, or something or the other. So we have done a certain amount of masking. Okay. Now, that does limit the use of the data, right? If you wanted to do really interesting work and understand what's happening at the extremely hyper-local level, you really want to be able to link the geography very granular level with the individual experiences. And unfortunately, that is something that we would not be able to make publicly available. So the extreme cost that has gone into collecting this data, and by the way, I should note before I even move forward, that we do it with a very kind concurrence and support from CEO Amitabh Kant and Niti Aayog as we collect this data. How can we make it available to a lot of all the students, researchers in India, worldwide, to generate the knowledge it should generate? Well, I think that that's going to require a bigger challenge, and the challenge may have something to do with the figuring out a way of masking some of the relevant information so that you can't identify exact local governance. At the same time, ensuring that some of the information that is required is linkable. And that may require a lot more thinking on our part, on the part of NDAP researchers, and see if we can figure out some sort of a restricted algorithm by which some of this masking and data leakages are made possible. But the fact is that even if we couldn't do it, okay, what is available to us is just fascinating and exciting, and the amount of research we can do with it to understand citizens' experiences and link citizens with the administrative systems to understand how any changes in the administrative systems are affecting lives of individual people. We can do. That's very important, and I'm delighted to have this available to you. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, my colleague Dr. Shekhar Gonu, who is the DG of the Monitoring and Evaluation. Shekhar, you have the semi-final word, because I'll start.
So, before I talk about NDAP, I joined Niti Aayog in 2019, April. And since then, I have seen this whole journey of NDAP and the challenges, the struggles, and the successes. And the work under the guidance of CEO sir and the tenacity and the leadership that Anna had given, and also the whole team and the partners who have supported, and the deep commitment to quality and detail is quite impressive. And it's so impressive. I've been using these data sets. So, I actually, in the last 6-7 months, I've used 3 different types of data sets. Recently, NFHS 5, where with a very small script, I could quickly know the district ranking in terms of the wealth. There's another government data set which I don't want to say here, but it took around 20 odd pages of data script to actually make it manageable to do some analysis, like turning text files into startup manageable data. And I think NDAP takes this to a totally different place. I think from the data access point from the researchers, I think it's a totally different level, because it's not only cleaning up the data sets, both administrative as well as survey data sets, but also interlinking them through very, very tedious and tough process. Because originally those data sets were never supposed to be interlinked, but through coding. So in a way, and also these are all time, some of them are time series data sets, some are at a granular level at village, mostly infrastructure, not personal information, block and district and state. So it's truly a rich treasure. Right now we have 200, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more data sets coming in. So, sir, Development Monitoring Evaluation Office, which is an attached office of Niti Aayog, the core purpose of this office is to track outputs and outcomes. Most of government schemes and policies and other initiatives. And monitoring and evaluation is an important mandate that has been given to Niti Aayog as per its constitution. So historically, most of the government has been very busy tracking the activities and inputs and activities. And how do we make sure that the system actually moves towards outputs and outcomes and build accountability around outcomes? I think that's the central part. And how do you build out accountability without high quality data? And data which is very fast, which is coming in on a almost close to real-time basis, which can be of very good use to the public policymakers. So I think we have issues in all the fronts. Administrative data, notwithstanding what do we say, still has lots of challenges. And I think NDAP is addressing it by improving the quality of the administrative data and then putting them in a place which can be easily downloadable. And then the survey data. The major challenge with survey data is it takes at least around 2 years before anyone can see what's happening with the data. So, and yet we have technologies which are turning around data sets once in 4 months. The private sector does it. So how can we bring them in? The third big area is this huge amount of data that is being accumulated outside the government, both in conventional space and non-conventional space. Private sector data, the consumer sentiment information, the search information, the mobility information. All these data sets and the private transaction information, all these data sets are immense use in the government for public policy and program purposes. But it needs a different set of skill set to do it. And these skill sets are largely in the private sector, in the Googles and Facebooks and others of the world. So how do we bring them in? Because government needs those data sets and also with large scale applicability. So in this context, Government of India has recognized the importance of deep digitization. The journey is there, but we want to be the top government in the world to fully use end-to-end data for improving governance and delivery of services. So as a part of it, under the aegis of Prime Minister's Office, the Data Governance Quality Index has been established or rolled out, where all the ministries and departments are supposed to do self-assessment of the use of IT in the monitoring of various schemes. So it has 6 different dimensions. How is the data collected? At what level of digitization is done? At what granularity? And then how is the quality ensured through back-end algorithms and so forth? What type of technologies are being used? Whether Industry 4.0 technologies are used or not? Then what type of analyticals? If you can collect the data, but what type of detailed analyticals you're doing? With the level of computing capabilities, you can also do predictive and that level of analytics. And of course, HR, security, and so. So the whole deep commitment on part of the government is to take on all frontiers to the frontier course of 5 minutes. So there are multiple challenges in administrative data, as we have discussed. We are siloized. The value of the data is about interconnectedness within the government data sets, outside the government data sets, and then big data. It is through triangulation you are going to get the deep insights. So that's where the capability is. So one area, every ministry department is expected to have established data and strategy units where we are pulling the monitoring part, the statistical and economics part, the information technology, NIC part, but also build huge capabilities on data sciences part. That's one part. I think there's a lot of need for partnerships and building lateral talent into the government. But in terms, the way I've in the last 3 years I've seen, there are areas lots of areas where India is world class, cutting edge, and I'm so proud my batchmate Secretary R.D. Nagendraji is here. The MG Narega, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Sadak Yojana, the level of technologies that are being used in terms of determining in decision making, machine learning, the GIS coded photographs being uploaded, and availability of the data sets. So, but there are also some ministries which are behind. Even if our lagging ministries can catch up with our frontier ministries, I think we can be making huge amount of progress. Likewise, this is the last point. There are so many innovations happening at the state level. We talk about social registry as one of the major steps to improve data architecture. And I was struck when I saw what Karnataka has done under Kutumba scheme. If you please, everyone please go and read it. They have translated, of course it's built on digitization of every ministry in detail, but having a overlay connected at the individual level to other, but households through a household ID largely built on food and public distribution system, digital ID, but translating that whole interconnected system and transforming the whole development architecture, which I think the Secretary Tamil Nadu has briefly mentioned, from application-based, middleman-driven development architecture to empowerment-based entitlement. You can sit in your home and the government can deliver the services to home. So I think there are lots of fascinating things happening, and NDAP is going to add a lot more to this whole journey. With that, once again, congrats, Anna, and thanks.
Thank you, Shekhar. So we started early and we're ending late. My apologies. But I believe we will be felicitating our panelists. I do to note that I will now be giving way to the person who many have cited as the hero of this, which is CEO Amitabh Kant. So Amitabh, you will be, I think, chairing the next panel. I repeat what I said, which is I'm very grateful, as it were, inheritor of the efforts of all of you and yourself, previous VCs. It's both an achievement and clearly an important responsibility. Responsibility in two respects. One is to maintain the momentum and maintain the quality. And second, to keep progressing along the lines that both Sonal and Shekhar had said, and as had been mentioned, I think by Secretary Governor, to the states. So this is already it's the tip of a moving iceberg, if that's not mixing metaphors, which is there's a lot below where we've got to, but yet we have to be dynamic in Niti, in using this tool to stimulate action in the lagging states and also bring these private sector databases and these household databases in here. I think at the end of the day, and I felt this as an economist, I don't call myself an econometrician, ultimately, it's not that we know the world through data, we know the world through information, but we can't have information without data. So fundamentally, the modern world is based on data. And I think what NDAP has done is to make that data more widely available. So it's the beginning of a long journey. Please join me in a round of applause for my fellow panelists, and then let me hand over to my colleague, CEO Amitabh Kant.
My grateful thanks to the chair for taking off time from his busy schedule and all the panelists for coming in this hot afternoon, Delhi afternoon, to be with us. Thank you very much. They were really very, very good discussion. And my NDAP team will now felicitate the panelists.